Unfortunately, the developments are not encouraging. It has been 6 years now that this violence, we call it insurgency, is creating Mozambique's biggest humanitarian crisis since the end of the civil war. And it is sitting in between the people of Mozambique and the world-class gas reserves that we have in the in northern Cabo Delgado. So it is creating a lot of havoc, not only in that region, but also throughout the country, and risking to expand to other parts. Now, since last time that we spoke, unfortunately, we have seen extremists gaining momentum. They have been expanding towards the south of the province, which is the area that since 2 years it has been stabilized by SAMIM, which is the SADC military deployment to support Mozambique in its fight against violent extremism in northern Mozambique. And we have seen a lot of momentum regrouping of the violent extremists, undertaking attacks that show that they have regained capacity, and they have been taking and abducting humanitarian workers, and it appears that they are demanding up to $1 million ransom to release some of those people. So this is more the situation in the ground, and unfortunately, government has not, despite all the efforts and the support that it has been having, either from the European Union and other bilateral partners, it has not been improving its security sector governance on time to contain the situation using its internal capacity.
And I think, one of the most concerning, key consequences of this insurgency and this instability in the area is, obviously the internally displaced people. I think the number that I have, in front of me is that there's more than 700,000 people who are internally displaced. I know the number can be more than that, but these are the ones that are documented. If you can give us, a bit of insight on that situation, just, the normal people, the men and women in Cabo Delgado who are being affected by this and who have to find themselves, being internally displaced, having to go to the surrounding areas to try and find aid, to try and find relief and safety, and also the impact that, this insurgency is having on the surrounding, whether it's provinces of Maputo or the nearest countries where these displaced people try and find refuge in.
The humanitarian crisis, as I've indicated to you, is Mozambique's biggest since the end of the civil war in 1992. You have most conservative statistics would indicate that nearly 1 million people are internally displaced. And they're internally displaced, but the level of hopelessness amongst those is appalling, is inhumane. Despite the efforts from the government, from domestic organizations and international
boundaries joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda. Tune into Salam.
Happen so much. That's for a bit of context. I think obviously we look at the way that the world has been the last few years, and particularly how India has been the last few years. In that light, it's not so much a surprise to see Hindu and Muslim tension, because that's what we've seen and what we've heard across in the government of the day is almost promoting the communalism, but I'm pretty sure it's quite unnatural. Ultimately, and we have to clear the violence that we saw on the streets of or across any city, across any part of which looks to defame and attack people of another religion, whether that religion or another religion. They are the action individual. It doesn't matter how many bots are trying to infiltrate your mind. It's still your personal action. It doesn't matter how you are bombarded by marketing. It doesn't matter how bombarded by populism and political influence. You still have a decision to make. Are you going to go and hurt a person or not?
This is Salam Media. Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam. Humanity sets the agenda.
Those who are in the ranks of the violent extremists and those who lost their lives, no sense of governance in order to put a basic order. It's not there.
Mm-hmm. And there are concerns that the hardships faced by those internally displaced people kind of makes them vulnerable to radicalization by these extremist groups. How significant is this threat, and what measures can be put in place to mitigate it? Because when you are vulnerable and you're in that situation, you have this extremist group, they're promising what they're promising. They might have food, they might have shelter, they might have water. You could be an easy target, to become a recruit of some sort.
Indeed. There have been some speculations suggesting that recruitments also might take place within those who are forced to leave their homes. But we have to acknowledge that at the moment, the governance failure is such that it creates the conditions for that to happen, be it amongst those who are fled and now they are IDPs, be those who are out there hopeless, without any kind of support in the northern and towards the southern districts, where people suffer the daily hardships caused by the violent extremism, and despite the efforts from the government that has put in place a DIN, which is the Northern Agency for the integrated development of the northern region, not much is happening. Not much is happening. So the level of hopelessness is putting everyone as easy target in those areas to be recruited, and hence the difficulty in ending the violence there, because though government is and its partner is fighting the insurgents, but also on the other hand, we haven't been able to stop the recruitment patterns in the region because of what I have indicated as resulting of the governance failure.
I'm trying to find, something that might resemble, a silver lining in all of this conflict. Are there any promising initiatives or programs currently underway that, give you some kind of hope for positive change in the situation in Cabo Delgado, particularly when it comes to the internally displaced peoples?
Not much is happening in that front. When violence started, government responded militarily. and used hard military equipment to respond, and even resorted to mercenary groups, the Wagner groups, and then the other South African military groups, and that did not help. That it might have exacerbated the radicalization, and those who were already radicalized might have entered into the war, into the violence activity because of how government responded. Now, government then invited international forces. They have the Rwandese there on the one hand, and until recently, they had Samim, which unfortunately left. But when you look at how government is responding to the situation, there is a military deployment. There is an attempt to improve the security sector governance, but not much has been able to be achieved there. But the reality is that not really, there is no coherent strategy aimed at addressing, number one, the root causes that if they did not trigger the situation, they created the conducive conditions for the violence to take long time. This is one. Number two, there is nothing in the ground suggesting that government is moving in the right direction. My point is, you don't see a coherent strategy aimed at addressing the situation. Seeing Samim, the SADC troops departing Cabo Delgado, you know that this is a failure. It's a failure from Samim, but it's more importantly a failure from the government to make sure that they would have leveraged on the Rwandese and on the Samim to weaken the support base and the military capacity of the insurgents, and then to engage on a comprehensive and robust national dialogue that it targeted not only the violent extremists, but more importantly, an inclusive dialogue, taking into account the aspirations of local communities in those areas, and also the aspirations of the people in Cabo Delgado. Listen, from Cabo Delgado to Maputo, it's almost 2 hours and 20 minutes with a Boeing flight. That's such long distance. And Mozambique is one of the highly centralized governments, highly centralized. For something to happen in northern Cabo Delgado, it must be decided from Maputo. And there is no tradition of Maputo decentralizing anything. So, you know, we can say so many things, but Mozambique's system of governance, it's conducive for conflicts because it's highly centralized. Local populations have no meaningful space to participate. Elections are fraudulent. They are not a constructive space for local groups to be empowered and to see space and mechanisms to meaningfully participate in governance. Plus the highly Maputicized, Maputo-centric, elitist extractivism of the resources, which leaves nothing for local populations. So this way or system of governance, if it is not creating, it is at least conducive for violence to continue.